What happens if the UK decides to extend Article 50?
If the House, having rejected leaving with the deal negotiated with the EU, then rejects leaving on the 29th of March without a withdrawal agreement and future framework, the Government will, on the 14th of March, bring forward a motion on whether Parliament wants to seek a short, limited extension to Article 50. And if the House votes for an extension, seek to agree that extension approved by the House with the EU and bring forward the necessary legislation to change the exit date commensurate with that extension.
Well, currently there are no plans to extend Article 50, although this could change. Even if you don't agree with me, consider subscribing by the end of the video. Why is this important? Well, if the UK does not choose to extend Article 50 and votes against a no deal, then we will automatically crash out of the EU on 11 PM on the 29th of March 2019 without a deal. So the UK must choose to extend Article 50 if it wants to negotiate a deal with the European Union. So how long could Article 50 be extended? Well, the length of any Article 50 extension would ultimately be determined through negotiation between the UK and the EU. It would depend on how much was left to do, whether it was just ratification or a complete renegotiation, and the UK's willingness to overcome some of the big obstacles. In particular, it would have to factor in the European parliamentary timetable. In May 2019 are the European parliamentary elections. On July 2019, new MEPs will take their seats, and by autumn 2019, the new European Commission faces appointment hearings in the European Parliament. As such, 4 key time slots have been suggested: the 18th of April 2019, the 23rd of May 2019, and the 2nd of July 2019 or beyond. So first let's talk about the 18th of April 2019. If more time is needed simply for both sides to ratify the withdrawal agreement, the EU could agree to an extension up to the 18th of April to coincide with the last voting sessions of the current European Parliament. It would be relatively straightforward, technically at least, to find the extra 3 weeks, but it would not give negotiators much time to reopen talks. In addition, it would not give the UK Parliament a lot of time to adopt supporting domestic legislation that goes along with the withdrawal agreement. So what about the 23rd of May? Well, if the UK Parliament adopts the withdrawal agreement before the end of the current European Parliament, but needs more time to adopt supporting domestic legislation, then the EU27 could decide to extend Article 50 until the European parliamentary elections on the 23rd to the 26th of May 2019. Although the European Parliament will no longer be sitting past April, it could be recalled for ratification any time until new MEPs take up their seats in July. But recent legal advice by the German Parliament and EU lawyers in Brussels suggests that it would be difficult for the UK to extend past May without holding European parliamentary elections. The European Commission could choose to initiate treaty infringement proceedings against the UK for denying UK or EU citizens in the UK the right to vote in the European elections, or indeed stand in the European elections. Any attempt to install MEPs without elections could also be subject to challenges in the EU courts. What about the 1st of July then? Well, here are the 2 different scenarios. If more time is needed for negotiations, the EU27 could choose to extend Article 50 through to the 1st of July 2019. This would give officials a little more leeway and delay ratification until the first sitting of the next European Parliament on the 2nd of July, although the European Parliament will no longer be sitting past April. It could still be recalled for ratification any time until new MEPs take up their seats in July. Presumably, the UK would not hold European parliamentary elections, as mentioned above. This could lead the European Commission to initiate treaty infringement proceedings against the UK. And what about extending beyond 2019? Well, extending the Article 50 period beyond July could prove more difficult. Technically, it would be difficult to see how the UK could remain a member state without elected representatives sitting in the European Parliament. Then there is timing. Some member states want to wrap up discussions and schedule ratification before appointment hearings for the new European Commission begin in the autumn. Of course, the European Parliament of 2014 to 2019, or the next European Parliament from 2019 to 2024, could choose to ratify the agreement before the meaningful vote in the UK. However, it is more likely that MEPs will want to wait until the House of Commons approves the withdrawal agreement, perhaps even with the withdrawal agreement bill. Therefore, the EU may only be willing to consider a longer extension for a general election or another referendum. So would the UK need to elect new European Members of Parliament or MEPs? Well, it's unclear whether the UK would need to elect new MEPs if talks extend beyond the European parliamentary elections on the 23rd of May or the first sitting of the new European Parliament on the 2nd of July. So far, there are no plans to elect new British MEPs, but there may be ways around this. An option would need the full backing of EU member states. Option 1 could be having UK MEPs remain until the end of the Article 50 period. Current UK MEPs would continue to sit in the European Parliament until the end of the Article 50 period. However, in June 2019, the EU adopted a decision on how it would reallocate the 73 UK seats in the EU Parliament. It agreed to reducing the total number of MEPs from 751 to 705, and to reallocate some UK seats among the EU 27. The plan is for this distribution to be effected from the next European Parliament. Keeping all 73 UK MEPs would increase the total number of MEPs to 773, which could prove problematic. Of course, the EU could decide to postpone any reallocation until the UK has formally left the EU, but this decision would need to be made quickly. Candidates in each member state are already mobilising to fill in the revised number of seats. Option 2 is granting the UK MEPs an observer status. People have suggested that current UK MEPs could be granted observer status in the new European Parliament, with no voting rights. However, it would also be slightly odd, as a continuing member state, UK ministers would only be able to vote on EU legislation in the Council. The EU 27 would also need to agree a final number of observers, as well as a selection process. Current MEPs could stay on as observers, or the UK Parliament could appoint its own members instead. Option 3 is appointing national representatives. Another option would be to appoint national representatives in lieu of MEPs until the end of the Article 50 period. This would closely resemble the process that Romania and Bulgaria followed when they joined the European Union in 2007. Although Romania and Bulgaria joined on the 1st of January, they only held European parliamentary elections in May. In the interim, they appointed national representatives, who had served as observers to the European Parliament from September 2005 to the end of the following year, in line with the accession treaty to the EU. The Romanian Parliament appointed a total number of 35 observers from the governing and opposition parties. Similarly, the Bulgarian government appointed 18 observers. When they joined, the number of seats in the European Parliament increased from 682 to 785. Likewise, the UK Parliament could appoint members as national representatives to the European Parliament. Option 4 is to elect new MEPs until the end of the Article 50 period. The UK would hold European parliamentary elections this year, although not necessarily at the same time as the rest of the EU. This option would only make sense if there was an extended extension. All of these options have disadvantages and much more depend on the likely length of an extension. So which of these options is most plausible? Well, on the 26th of February 2019, the Prime Minister suggested that the government would propose a short, limited extension. What happens to Article 50 if the UK calls a general election or a second referendum? Well, first the UK would need to write to the EU asking for an extension of Article 50, which would need to be agreed by all member states on the Council. Then the government would need to legislate to change the EU Withdrawal Act, which sets the date of the UK's exit as the 29th of March 2019. This may need primary legislation and would have to be done in the wash-up session. Could the UK seek multiple extensions? Well, the Lisbon Treaty does not clarify whether a second extension might be possible. Presumably, it would require the consent of all member states. Could the UK buy more time by revoking Article 50? So a number of senior politicians, such as former Prime Minister John Major and Conservative MP Ken Clarke, have suggested that the UK could buy more time by unilaterally revoking Article 50.
Mr. Speaker, it seems to be plain to anyone who's listened to most of the debates in this House that there is no majority for any proposition on our future relationships with the European Union in this House of Commons, except the majority that is clearly against leaving with no deal. I propose to vote for the Prime Minister's withdrawal agreement, but I doubt whether it will pass. And if it is passed and we get into a transition, there is no majority or consensus on what the government is supposed to be negotiating for in the years that will follow, that will settle our future political and economic relationships with Europe. So the Prime Minister has to be flexible on some things. So would she consider, if she loses the debate next Tuesday, moving to the obvious step in the national interest of delaying or revoking Article 50?
This might also be a way of avoiding demands from member states reluctant to grant an extension. Until December 2017, it was not clear whether the UK could end the Article 50 process. However, the European Court of Justice has ruled that a member state could decide to revoke the Article 50 notification unilaterally. However, the judgment made clear that the purpose of the extension should be to remain in the EU, not just to buy more time to leave it.
To revoke that notification unilaterally in an unequivocal and unconditional manner by a notice addressed to the European Council in writing, after the Member States concerned has taken the revocation decision in accordance with its constitutional requirements. The purpose of that revocation is to confirm the EU membership of that Member State concerned under terms that are unchanged as regards its status as a Member State, and that revocation brings the withdrawal procedure to an end.
So revoking and then immediately retriggering Article 50 would not be possible. But it is hard to see how the ECJ could take action against a much more ambiguous revocation. But do you agree with me? Join in the debate below and subscribe.